Welcome to the Minnesota Rovers Tuesday evening presentation. Minnesota Rovers is an outdoors club based in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Our members organize trips that range from 1 hour to 2 weeks in Minnesota or further afield. Examples of our activities include hiking, biking, backpacking, skiing, snowshoeing, paddling, and rock climbing. We also organize conservation and trail clearing trips. Our members have experience and skills in many outdoor activities, so if you want to learn a new outdoor activity, we can probably help you. For more information, go to mnrovers.org. Now let's move on to this week's presentation.
You're here tonight to hear about the Boundary Waters. Scott Beauchamp is here from the Friends of the Boundary Waters, and he's going to talk a little bit about some of the issues and dangers of copper-sulfide mining and the current status of proposals and what the Friends of the Boundary Waters is doing with that. Scott's worked in a variety of places, including manager of public affairs for the St. Paul Chamber of Commerce and communication director for the Campaign to Save the Boundary Waters. And right now he's the policy director for the Friends of the Boundary Waters. And he's done a number of speeches and presentations for various political candidates and groups. So Scott, take it away.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Fran and Stacy and everyone for having me here. I'm really happy to be here. Essentially, I think that summed it up. I don't have to give it too much more of an intro. So the only thing I would say is that if you have questions, feel free to ask me along the way. You can just raise your hand or virtually or use the reaction or just put it in the chat. And I will try to answer them along the way. Potentially, I'll say, hey, let's save that because I'm going to get to it in a second. But feel free to ask questions along the way or at the end. And let's get into it. I really appreciate being here. And, it's always fun to talk with groups like yours because as I was telling our friends at the beginning, I've always found that, groups like this are the people that care the most about things. And so that's exactly what our group was founded on. And so I'd love to tell you a little bit about this threat that unfortunately we are facing. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here. I'll get started. I might not be able to see if you raise your hand, so maybe put it in the chat or maybe Stacy or Frank can let me know if there's a question. So as I said, we are the Friends of the Boundary Waters. Our organization was actually founded in 1976 for the purpose of protecting the Boundary Waters, but not only protecting it, getting it designated as the federal wilderness that it is today. Our forefathers and foremothers were successful in their efforts, and President Jimmy Carter actually was the one who signed it into law. It's a 1.1 million acre wilderness in northern Minnesota, obviously on the boundary with Canada. It's over 1,000 interconnected lakes, and it's actually the most visited wilderness area in America. So it's a really special treasure that we have up there, and I'm sure many of you know that, and this isn't breaking any new ground. But unfortunately, there is a very serious threat, that's been proposed, and it's a fight that we've been fighting. It's a fight we've been fighting for a while. Matthew, that's a great question. I certainly do have some thoughts on that. Let's return to that one because yes, I do have some thoughts on that one. So let's talk about it. If I can click over here. Okay, so as Matthew actually mentioned here, I might need to update my map, but for now, I'm just going to talk about. For the longest time, what we've always been saying is there's two mines and one threat, right? There's two mines that a lot of people have heard of. One is called Twin Metals. That's right outside the edge of the Boundary Waters. It actually was proposed on the Cowichan River, which flows right into the Boundary Waters, right? So really scary stuff. Polymet was proposed upstream of Lake Superior, in the headwaters of St. Louis River. St. Louis River is obviously, like I said, the main tributary for Lake Superior. Lake Superior is 10% of the world's fresh water. So you can kind of see here exactly what part of the state we're talking about. And yes, Matthew, I'm going to need to be adding tech to this map very soon, unfortunately. And I'll explain what that means in a little bit. So why is it so scary, right? Why do we care? Why do we care that they're proposing mines up there? Well, we care because the scientists that we work with and the ones that we don't work with really raise the red flag about this type of mining, because it is actually known as the most polluting industry in America, according to the EPA, and that's by chemical releases. Chemical releases is exactly what we're worried about with these mines. There's never been a copper mine, that copper-sulfide nickel mine. So one important thing to note, I would say, is that there is a big difference between iron mining, which has been traditionally been done here in Minnesota for a long time, and this more heavy metal mining. So I'm talking copper mining primarily. That's what they're talking about. But it also is the same way that they've mined for nickel and other things like that. The reason that this mining is so polluting is because, well, there's a couple of reasons, but it's an inherently polluting process because the way that they get the metals out, if you can imagine, there's a big piece of sulfur ore that's, not, it's 99% sulfur and less than 1% of the actual metal. And this is from the mining company's own numbers. Because of that, when they break it down, you use a chemical bath. So you have 99% waste, 1% metal. And what does that waste look like? Well, you're looking at a picture of it right here. It's sulfuric acid. It's, it's not what we want anywhere really, but it's certainly not in the clean water of the Boundary Waters or Lake Superior. It's, unbelievably dangerous. And that's not the only chemical. It also releases mercury, arsenic, and a number of awful things. So we're quite concerned about this, as you can imagine. We do not feel like this is a compatible industry with the water-rich environment of northeastern Minnesota. You can see right here, I'll talk about the Twin Metals mine first. This is, again, the one that's proposed right inside the Boundary Waters. We're looking at the land that was owned by Twin Metals. So you can see this is not a mining district, or, this is not an industrial zone. This is the wilderness, and we drew the lines on the map, yes, but you wouldn't know if you didn't have the map, it all is a beautiful, beautiful wilderness. And so, as we know, some mining executives will tell me, well, what's the problem? Why can't we do it? We're not in the Boundary Waters. Well, as everyone on this call knows, water flows, right? It doesn't follow the rules of the map, and doesn't follow the lines that we drew on the map, right? So we're really concerned about that, as you can imagine. Fortunately, this is actually some very recent good news that we've had. We had a major win in actually just last month, and hopefully some people heard about this. The Biden administration announced what's called a 20-year mineral withdrawal in the Rainy River watershed. So what that means is essentially the Rainy River watershed is home to the western portion of the Boundary Waters. It's also home to the proposed Twin Metals site. So not only does that mine, Twin Metals, no longer have leases, those leases were canceled. Biden actually took it a step further, and I say Biden, but the Department of the Interior, the Forest Service, took it a step further and actually said all the federal land in this area cannot be mined for 20 years. Now, 20 years is the maximum that they're allowed to do by law. So if it were to be extended permanently, it would require an act of Congress. I don't know if anyone is in Betty McCollum's district, but Congresswoman Betty McCollum is a great champion for this issue. And she actually introduced a bill to do just that. And she's been fighting for it for a long time. Unfortunately, as many people know, federal Congress is quite difficult to pass any bills, especially with some things changing recently. So I do not know if that will be able to pass. I certainly hope that it will. And if anyone can do it, it's definitely Betty. But for the meantime, this is an awesome win. And so it's definitely worth celebrating. And we certainly did celebrate it. The next mine that I want to talk about, and we said 2 mines, 1 threat. That's 1 down, 1 to go, and maybe 2 to go, unfortunately, which I'll get to in a little bit. There's one called Polymet. Now, this is actually an even older proposed project. You may have heard of this. This was actually a fully permitted mine by the Dayton administration in 2018. Fortunately, since then, ourselves, other environmental groups, and the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa have gotten various permits overturned through lawsuits, and we're going to be having even more coming up. The reason that this one in particular is so dangerous is because, as I mentioned, again, we can see clearly not an industrial zone, clearly not a mining district. This is exactly the headwaters that lead into the St. Louis River, which leads into Lake Superior. And like I said, 10% of the world's fresh surface water. As I mentioned, this one in particular is really dangerous because it is right upstream of the Fond du Lac Reservation. Now, the Fond du Lac Band has treaty rights, which are supposed to be the supreme law of the land. It's to hunt, fish, get wild rice, drink clean water from the St. Louis River, right? It flows right through their reservation. And so obviously they're very concerned. So it really is a serious environmental justice threat and environmental justice issue. Additionally, one thing that's, just a specific detail that's quite disturbing is polymet. Again, when I say this was fully permitted by the DNR, our DNR. They use what's called an upstream tailings dam. And trust me, you don't want me to explain what that is right now, the details of it, but I can send more information to understand like the engineering behind it. But essentially what they do is they use the waste itself and stack it up and try to dry it out to create a dam. That type of dam has actually been found to be inherently much more unstable. And actually in Brumadinho, Brazil, in 2019, one of these dams collapsed and actually killed over 250 people. I am going to show the video of the dam collapse right here. It's just really short, just so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So you can see there, really scary stuff that we're talking about here, right? Again, like the video mentioned, this type of dam has now been banned in Brazil. It's been banned in Chile, Peru, and yet our DNR is still standing behind it to this day. So it's very, very worrying. I do hope and do believe that we will come out victorious, but it's a scary, scary prospect to think about one of these holding up. Literally, again, you look at Polymet's documents, it's supposed to be as taller than the Statue of Liberty. A dam like this, taller than the Statue of Liberty, holding up waste upstream of Lake Superior. It's a really, unfortunately, scary thought. So what's the good part? What are we doing about it, right? We're not obviously just going to sit down and let this happen. At Friends of the Boundary Waters, we're dedicated to using every, tool at our disposal. First and foremost, like I mentioned, I don't know if I would say first and foremost, but first, as I mentioned, litigation, right? Minnesota law is certainly not perfect, as I'll get into in a little bit, environmental law, but it does allow you to challenge these decisions, right? And so we're allowed to make our case, and we've actually been, we use our lawyers at Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy, Water Legacy. We also have some pro bono law firms that are helping us, Robbins Kaplan, Maslin, Frederickson. It's a lot of work that goes into it, but they do an excellent job. We've actually gotten at least 3, and 2 more permits are pending. 3 permits overturned, 2 more are pending. So, we feel very strongly that the Dayton administration, did not make the right decision. And I think these court cases are backing that up, right? We also work on legislation. Litigation has been effective, but we would prefer not to fight every mine, one at a time, whack-a-mole style. It's kind of a weird position working for a nonprofit like this, where I'm essentially trying to put myself out of a job, right? Like I would love for Friends to just be an organization that sends kids to the Boundary Waters, right? Like that's what we would ideally be if there was not these threats, right? And so the main way we hope to accomplish that for the long term, like I said, is legislation. We chose to make a decision, although we do advocate somewhat on the national level, like I mentioned, for Betty McCollum's bill, where we really do a lot of focus on the state level, because as you can see, like especially this year, a lot of things it's a lot easier for things to happen at the state level, right? And so, there's definitely a lot of headwinds against us. The mining companies do have a lot of money and can make a lot of donations. Unfortunately, we have some legislative proposals that we're trying to advance, which I'll get into in a moment. Really what is foremost, I should say, is the citizen action. It's all people like yourself That's what our organization was founded upon. We're made up of members across Minnesota and frankly across the country who want to protect the boundary waters in Lake Superior. Everything that we do is possible. Like, we're never going to have more money than the mining companies. And yes, don't get me wrong, a donation is great. My staff will never let me say no to a donation, but the most important thing is people taking action, calling your legislator, calling Governor Walz, coming to the courthouse, signing the petition. That's what really matters. And I think you really can see that on the state level. When we started working on this, some of this legislation was supported by maybe 4 representatives. Now it's, legislators, senators, and representatives at the state level. Now we have over 70 supporting our main legislation, Prove It First, which I'll get to. And so that's because of people like yourself who took action, called, because when you get 10 calls as a state legislator, that's a lot. And so they really listen to that. And then lastly, just briefly, we do have a affiliate organization, Friends of the Boundary Waters Action Network, which is a 501c4, which can endorse political candidates, take political action. And we do that because, a lot of times this battle is also fought at the polling booth, right? And so we want to make sure that we're electing Boundary Waters champions, because right now, unfortunately, we do not have a pro-environment majority, and so we're getting closer, but we need to have that. So that's kind of what that's about there. And I'm happy to, in a separate time, answer questions about that. So as I mentioned, we're doing a lot at the courthouses. If you ever want to get more involved on the citizen action side, my associate, Maggie Morin, is on the call right now. Maggie, if you could just throw your email in the chat. Maggie runs our Citizen Action Network, which is kind of the group that you see here. And I do believe it has grown since then. And so it's a group of essentially our most dedicated supporters, where Maggie will send you an email either every week or every other week, just a short email saying, hey, this is the action that we're taking this week. Can you please share this article? Things like that, and share it on your social media, whatever it may be. It may come down to the courthouse, right? And so, and obviously we know not everyone can do everything every week, and that's why we try to have a large group, right? So if you want to have your email added to that, just shoot Maggie an email and she'll make sure to get you on the list. Again, like I mentioned, legislation, key part here, and we're going to get into more details on that right now. So one thing that I often hear working on this is that Minnesota has the strictest environmental standards in the world. Nothing bad could ever happen here. We're Minnesota, we'll do it perfect. Now, in case you didn't guess from the tone of my voice, this is not accurate, unfortunately. I wish it was. I truly wish it was. And I'm going to point out really some problems that we've come up across and we've identified and other groups have identified, and then kind of the legislation that we are trying to, introduce to solve them. So one is kind of what I mentioned before, the DNR. We really have a lack of regulatory oversight. We like to think, and I think most people think, and I probably thought this before I started working on this, that these projects simply go to DNR or Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and they just look and they say, okay, well, is it going to pollute or not? And if not, it's not going to happen. And if so, or if it's not going to pollute, it's okay. And if it does pollute, we won't let it happen. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We've actually really been exposed to some flaws in our system recently. The first one, and again, we have a case still pending before the Minnesota Supreme Court about this. They're actually waiting on a decision right now. It's kind of shocking, but our pollution control agency, this is a little bit in the weeds, but essentially EPA is the federal organization, is supposed to weigh in on the pollution control agency's permit that they had to issue for the PolyMet project. The EPA scientists sent a long letter, and I have this letter, and detailing all the problems with the permit, why it would not uphold the Clean Water Act, essentially why it wouldn't protect our water. Our leadership, this was under John Linkstein, they directed, and Shannon Lotthammer, they told EPA, don't submit your letter during the public comment period. Because if they would have done that, we would have known about it, and it could have made bad press. And so they actually told them, read it to us over the phone, so there's no record of it, and we'll take it into account. Well, lo and behold, about 6 months later, that same scientist sends a letter saying, hey, here's still all these problems with the permit you didn't address. 2 days later, the permit is issued. And so that's what we're talking about here, and this is we only know about this because after that, the EPA scientists blew the whistle and leaked all of this and said, I've never seen this in my career. I've never been told not to keep it public. And that's our own tax dollars paying for that. And so we are before the Minnesota Supreme Court about that right now. I truly hope that we will win, because this is, for me, was one of the most shocking things I learned. And it's pretty unfortunate. And so the EPA employee union actually joined our lawsuit because they said, this was so egregious. So that's what we're talking about from our leadership. And now Shannon Lothammer, she's over in DNR. And she's the one who directly said, don't send this public comment. It's wild stuff. And what we're talking about is DNR also has problems too, because they actually have an inherent conflict of interest. If you look at their mission and the laws that create DNR, they actually have a mission to promote mining. That's written in from the old iron mining, lobbyists 150 years ago, but it's still there. So they have an obligation to promote mining and protect natural resources. So in some ways, you can almost, I can't quite get there, but I can almost understand when they say, okay, well, I know this mine is going to pollute, but I also have to promote mining. And so when you get that political leadership that says, okay, we need to get this one over the line, that's when you get situations like this. And so it's really, really worrying when our regulators, it's like who watches the watchers, our regulators are not keeping us safe currently. So to address that problem, one thing that we want to do is we introduce a bill called the DNR Conflict of Interest Act. Now, this is super simple. All it says is shift that obligation to promote mining to DEED, the Department of Employment and Economic Development, because there's a clear conflict of interest, right? If it shifts, DNR can be the permitting agency and only focus on protecting natural resources. And so we think that's a no-brainer. That was actually passed, and it's actually we are a nonpartisan organization, but separately from us, this was actually passed into the DFL party platform. So it is actually that's how much support it has amongst at least DFL voters, but all of our policies have been supported, across the aisle. Well, I should say across the aisle by voters. We have yet to identify any Republican supporters of our bills, but if you know of anyone that you think would be interested, we'd love to have it. Another big problem that we have here, unfortunately, is with what's called financial assurance. And again, so PolyMet, like I said, it was the only one of these mines that was ever fully permitted in Minnesota. So we know a lot more about what these projects would actually look like. And that's why we use it as an example. Now, in Minnesota law, we require mines to put up a certain amount of money to reclaim the site. Now, you can never actually reclaim the site to the same level of nature that it was, but theoretically, you can at least shut it down and close up shop so it's not leaking and things like that, right? Well, the problem is, again, our DNR approved a deal for PolyMet where they actually are allowed to pay off their own investors first before they pay off the state of Minnesota. So if you look at this graph here, you can see in the orange, that's how much money it will cost to reclaim the site if the mine were to end in year 1, year 2, year 4, whatever. And the green is the amount of money in the trust fund, the cash trust fund. So what happens in year 10, if there's an accident, there's actually over $1 billion liability there. Who's on the hook for that? Well, unfortunately, PolyMet, they have a terrible parent company, which I will get to in a moment. Their parent company is not named on the permits. PolyMet is a shell corporation. So what happens? They declare bankruptcy, and who's on the hook? It's all of us. It's the next generation and the next generation after that. And so it's extremely worrying. And so what we are proposing, along with a bunch of others, is something called the Taxpayer Protection Act. It's very simple. Pay that money up front and in cash. Don't give us an IOU. Stand by your project. Pay it up front and in cash. At the very least, we obviously hope these projects never go forward. But if they do, they should at the very least have to put up this money up front and in cash, like I said. And so, again, after that mining disaster that I showed you in Brazil, it actually took $7 billion to clean it up. There's a $7 billion settlement. But the only reason they were able to get that settlement was because the parent company was named on the permit. So this, again, would require them to put that money up front and in cash. Another problem, and one of the problems that I find working on this issue, is that sometimes I don't know which problem to address. And one of them that I need to address, though, is the corrupt ownership of these businesses, these mining companies. Unfortunately, some of these mining companies are literally some of the worst actors in the global industry, in the global world. On the left, you see Antofagasta. That was a Chilean mining company that owned Twin Metals. They have a history of polluting their own country, bribery in their own country. And in fact, in America, in December of 2016, immediately after Donald Trump won the election, the CEO and president of their company, the owner of their company, bought a mansion in Washington, D.C. A couple of weeks later, who were his tenants? Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner. You can't make this stuff up. And so, lo and behold, a year later, they get their mine permits back. And so, there's technically nothing illegal about that, but certainly, I would say that is not above board, and obviously that's the kind of company that's what they're willing to resort to. On the right, if you can believe a company is even worse than that, I honestly might argue that Glencore is worse, if that's possible. Glencore is the owner of Polymet, which again is the Lake Superior mine. The reason that I have this picture up here, that's the CEO of Glencore accepting the Medal of Freedom and Friendship from Vladimir Putin. That's the kind of company that we're talking about here. They have, like I said, are still doing business with Russia. They have, again, literally you could just Google Glencore and see for yourself. They use child labor. They have mining disasters around the world. They have bribery scandals around the world. They just had to settle for over $1 billion in the U.S. and U.K. for bribing officials, and then they had a separate settlement in Africa. It's pretty wild how many bad acts they've committed. And so, what we're saying is, if we have to do this, let's give good stewards. Let's keep these companies out. Because we wouldn't just let anybody work in a daycare, right? Why would we just let anybody work, take care of our most precious water, our most precious resource? So the bad actor bill would simply ban, and this would only apply to non-ferrous mining industry, to be clear, ban companies from getting a permit to mine in Minnesota if you've had violations of child labor, environmental pollution, bribery, labor violations, anything like that. And so again, we don't want the mafia running the solid waste industry, right? There's laws to prevent against that. And this is the same idea here. Additionally, this is a bit of a smaller bill, but we are also supporting a bill that would actually direct funding to begin a 50-year clean water plan. There's a group called the University of Minnesota Water Council that would take money and actually look at all the threats to our water, because again, obviously we work on one area of our state, but the MPCA's own numbers say 56% of Minnesota's waters are impaired right now. And so we don't want to become the state where we're in crisis 50 years from now or 30 years from now because we didn't take care of our water and we took it for granted. And so that's what this is about, is actually directing funding to the University of Minnesota to begin. It will be a longer process, but to begin and actually create, identify the threats and create a plan to ensure that we have that water. And finally, our main bill, saved it for last, save the best for last, prove it first. Prove it first is one I hope some people have heard of on the call. It is a law that was actually based on a law in Wisconsin. There was a law in Wisconsin for 20 years. What it said was, if you want to do this kind of mining, you must first show an independent scientific proof that there's been one of these mines that operated for at least 10 years without polluting and has been closed for 10 years without polluting. In our estimation, and I believe all the science will back us up, there's never been a mine that can meet these standards. And because of that, during the 20 years in Wisconsin, when it was law, no mines were permitted. And it was actually repealed in 2017 by Governor Scott Walker because he wanted to try to permit one of these mines. So we don't believe Minnesota should be the test subject, the guinea pig for any unproven technology. Again, the mining companies claim that there's been safe mines, and we're saying, let's see the proof. Let's see you prove it first. Again, like I mentioned earlier, when we started working on this in 2019, I believe there was 3 or 4 legislators that were in support of this bill. And now there's over 70. And so we're moving it along. And that's because of, people on this call. Additionally, there's all the groups that you can see here that support this legislation. And so We also have local businesses. It's a pretty amazing caucus and pretty amazing group, I should say, coalition. And it really is a movement that's building and building. And so that's what we want to see passed. My last, kind of call to action, if you will, we actually are going to be holding a Prove It First Day at the Capitol on April 4th. So I would say save the date if you're around. We're asking people. There's a number of roles to be fulfilled. We're going to be hopefully meeting with our legislators as well as all day. Like Maggie and myself will be there all day. Helping people meet with their legislators, but also from 1:30 to 2:30, we'll be doing a rally in the rotunda. So we'd love to have people show up. We'll speak, and we're going to be putting pressure on our legislators to support this bill. So if anyone can make it, please again email Maggie, or you can email me, and that's kind of what our next big thing is, and all the support really helps. So I'll put my contact information in the chat, but I'm happy to take any questions. And I guess one thing I'd say is, Maggie, if you're on still, can you just put the Prove It First Take Action links in the chat, because in case anybody wants to do a quick take action. But with that, I will open it up for questions, and I'm happy to answer anything that anybody has.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. This is Rob. Say, would the mining industry be able to point to any upstream dams that have worked for some period of time?
So potentially, so it's a little bit, so the Prove It First law, just to be clear, is not actually based on upstream tailings dams. It's any type of pollution. So like, leaching, anything like that. So there have been, as at least to my knowledge, tailings dams that didn't fail, but many of them fail at a much higher rate, and too high of a rate, again, to be allowed in Brazil, Chile, Peru. And we certainly think too high of a rate to be allowed upstream of Lake Superior.
I would agree. I just wanted to know what their side's going to be.
Oh, yeah. No, trust me. I'm happy to talk about it. I can read you their whole list of talking points just off the top of my head if you want to hear them so much now.
I think I'd get sick.
Yeah, yes, trust me, it's not fun. Any other questions I can answer?
I was just wondering if you get any support from some of the religious organizations like Isaiah. They do a lot of this type of work.
Yeah, no, it's actually funny that you mentioned that. Maggie and I were literally having a conversation of like, we need to get in touch with Isaiah earlier today. So it's kind of funny that you say that. Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light does support this legislation, and I think Isaiah actually supports it, but they just have they have a lot of issues. So we do kind of want to maybe push it up their list a little bit, but I know they have a lot of important work to do. But yeah, Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. But if you know of any other ones, or if anybody has like a church group that you'd like us to come speak at, or that wants to get involved, or talk about Prove It First or whatever, we're always around, and we love to talk to everybody about it.
Okay, and I might do that. Yeah, Mayflower. I do a lot of work at Mayflower. Yeah.
Okay. And just quickly, the links that Maggie put in the chat there, those are actually quick take action links. Obviously, if you want to write out a message to your legislators or to Governor Walz, that would be great. But if you don't have it that much time, or your writing's not your favorite thing, we do have these take action links that have suggested text. One of those is to your state legislators, and one of those is to Governor Walz, because we definitely need to get Governor Walz on board. So far, he has yet to really take a position publicly on the mines at all. And I'm not, I don't love it, but I am in some weird ways impressed that he somehow managed to do that for 4 years. But we'd love to take a position in favor of protecting the boundary waters and in favor of protecting Lake Superior, because like I said, we do think that's really popular across the state, across age groups, political demographics, whatever it is. I think one thing Minnesotans can agree on is protecting clean water. Any other questions I can answer?
So what is New Range?
Oh, right. Wow. I can't believe I almost forgot. Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. And so What was mentioned here is actually, this is extremely recent, as in like last week. The Polymet mine that I mentioned, the one that's upstream of Lake Superior, they actually are merging with another mining company. And I haven't added this to the presentation yet because we don't know exactly all the details. But essentially what it is it's a mining company called Teck that had some permits in actually the Boundary Waters watershed. And so they are actually merging with Polymet to essentially create a mega mine that would actually be in both watersheds. So it kind of has the unique, dubious distinction of actually being a mine that would threaten both watersheds. And so we're certainly not in favor of it. Like I said, it literally just was finalized last week. We're again trying to put some pressure on the DNR to make, to put some oversight on this. And so it's certainly worrying. But I think it's just another reason why we need Prove It First, right? Because Prove It First doesn't distinguish between one watershed and another watershed. It says, let's protect all of our water. And so it would really stop this. So that's what New Range is. It's certainly a worrying one. And so we'll be talking much more about that. So I would say sign up for, our newsletter. We try our best not to email too much, but we'll definitely be sharing more information about that as it goes along. I also see a question that says, how it becomes so dangerous. So that's exactly right. You actually answered the question yourself. What someone said, the problem with copper sulfide mining, well, there's a few problems, and some of them depend on what mining techniques they use, but the inherent problem is, like you mentioned, we have the copper sulfide, right? So that's sulfur and copper. But the problem is when they separate it and they expose it to air and water, the waste to air and water, that's when it naturally turns into sulfuric acid by that process of being exposed to water and air. Again, when you have an open mine pit, it's pretty difficult to keep it from being exposed to water. And so, especially in this region. And so, it's very, very dangerous and very likely to create sulfuric acid, which is also known as acid mine drainage. So I would just Google acid mine drainage, and they'll be able to explain it better than I can.
Well, there's some kind of acid rain, but that was, I guess, due to the what you call it, the wood.
Right. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, there's any number of threats.
Yeah.
Scott, I had a question for you. So if we want to come to the Prove It First day on April 4th, do you want to know that we're going to be there meeting with our legislators?
Yes. So I feel like I should have paid you to ask me that question. So yes, absolutely. We would love to know, because actually if people are willing, you don't have to do this. We also have other people who are willing to do this and other roles you can play. But if you're actually willing to set up a meeting with your legislator for that day, we can then actually connect you with other people in your district, or of course you can bring your own, friends that live in your district. And so, yes, essentially we would love for people to reach out to their state legislator, schedule a meeting, and then let us know when that meeting is. And then that way we can coordinate with you, and also make sure to give you training and stuff like that. Alternatively, if you want to reach out to me first to talk about it first, or how do I reach out to my legislator? How do I ask for it? Please do. I'll get right back to you. Maggie, again, like I said, you can of course email me, but Maggie is tracking everyone that has RSVP'd. So that'd actually be the main reason. And also we need to know how much food to get, because we'll be having food, and maybe I should have led with that. Here, I'll just real quick pull up the link to that event. Again, like I said, you can just email Maggie, but for more information, oh man, sorry, clicked the wrong screen. So for more information, you can click that, but really at the end of the day, we read all our emails. Sometimes we get a lot, but we definitely will get back to you. Especially if it's about this, we're going to be right on it, because this is the most important thing we have. And we'll be with our legislators and everything. So anyone and anything you can do is greatly appreciated. I guess I'll take any more questions, but if not, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to be here, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. If something pops up later on, shoot me an email, shoot Maggie an email, and we'll be in touch.
Well, go ahead.
Sorry, Rob, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank you, Maggie, and everyone down there at Friends for all the work you do. I mean, it takes a lot, and for you to be able to rattle this stuff off your head, you've repeated it several times, and it's really hard to, I could go argue with someone right now and probably say, well, it's just really, really bad. I mean, this guy named Scott, he can tell you.
Right.
And,
hey, well, if you ever have
appreciate
that
your work.
conversation, give me
What's
a
that?
call and I'll come down. If you ever get in that argument, give me a call. I'll come down, because you're right. I do, but I'm grateful for that. I really do feel honored to be able to do this work. I think that we're an organization that's built on people like yourselves, and so it means so much. And I will certainly share the words with the team. Really quickly, Pat asked, what are the implications of U.S. Rep. Stauber being chair of the Energy and Minerals Subcommittee? Really quickly, it's bad. It's not good implications. U.S. Rep. Pete Stauber is actually the representative for the Boundary Waters area. You would think that he would want to protect it. He's actually one of the biggest mining proponents that there are. When the House became Republican in January, he was elevated to committee chair for this mineral. The long and short of it is, I don't think that he'll really be able to pass any legislation that hurts us, but he can certainly talk about it. He can certainly propose it. He can have hearings and tell us why we're all big hypocrites, right? So it isn't good. And it's certainly, frankly, like I said, this is one of the main reasons it'll be a very big challenge to get Betty's bill moving forward. So it's not, it certainly is bad for us, but I don't think that it's necessarily crippling or crushing or anything like that. It's not good. And certainly, if you live in that district, let your congressperson know that he is getting it wrong. And so
I think you also have to remember too that it's not the evil Republicans. The Democrats are also on the side of the mining. So you can't say that it's the Democrats are just as bad.
No, there's a lot of truth to that, unfortunately. Like I mentioned, Governor Walz hasn't taken a position on this. Amy Klobuchar hasn't taken a position.
Amy Klobuchar is her grandpa is a mining, I believe.
Right. I was going to say they
descended from mining. So
you're absolutely right. And that's the only reason that I say that is just because Pete is very, very pro mining. But you're absolutely right. Tina Smith, like she was a lieutenant governor when they permitted PolyMet. We haven't even been able to get a hearing. For leadership hasn't even allowed proof first a hearing, despite a third of the legislature supporting it. And that's on both sides of the aisle. So you're absolutely right. I will say we've made more progress with the Democratic Party, but again, like I said, we would love to work across the aisle. So if anybody knows, we have reached out and we will continue to reach out. But we certainly are open to speaking with anyone of any political persuasion, background, whatever it may be, that's interested in protecting clean water. I was just going to quote Matthew and say we owe it to the next generation to do the right thing now. I think I can't leave it on a better note than that, because that's really what it's all about. That's what we're at Friends of the Boundary Waters is all about, is making sure that next generation gets clean water and gets access to the boundary waters in Lake Superior. Everyone can have that Minnesota heritage that I know I enjoyed and I know a lot of people enjoyed. So I want to leave it at that note. But please give me a call, shoot me an email if you have any questions. I'm always around, and Maggie's around, and so we're happy to talk to you. And I appreciate you having me. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
Thanks for watching this Minnesota Rovers presentation. If you want to see more, please click on the link to our channel or the subscribe button below. Thank you.